One of the coolest things about House the Dragon, right, the new series that's set in the world of Game of Thrones, a world of ice and fire, is that there's a house that was completely and entirely left out of the main series, right? Mainly because they're mysterious and they haven't exactly had that strong of a presence in the books. But we get to see that house in its high, in the height of their power in House of the Dragon. I'm of course referring to House Hightower. Now, if you're aware, Oldtown is where House Hightower originates from. Now, initially, when the Andals came over to Westeros to conquer it, right, the First Men, the Children of the Forest, the Giants were already there. House Hightower was already established in Oldtown. Now, this is a quote directly from The World of Ice and Fire, page 213. No history of the Reach is complete without a look at Oldtown, the most grand and ancient of cities, still the richest, largest, and most beautiful in all of Westeros, even if King's Landing has eclipsed it as most populous. How old is Oldtown truly? Many a maester has pondered that question, but we simply do not know. Now, that's interesting, because when you go to the very beginning of A World of Ice and Fire, the very first page, the Dawn Age, when it talks about how, hey, this is how potentially old the world that A Song of Ice and Fire is set in, this is how old it is. No one really knows. Is it 40,000 years old, as some claim, or is it 500,000 years old, as some claim? George loves to use that idea, that trope, and apply it all over his world. So there's no direct sort of like, hey, this is how old it is. And when you have something like that, you can sort of kind of fill in most of the blanks, and all of the mystery sort of starts to dissolve surrounding his story. If you want a good example of that, look at the classic series Lord of the Rings. In the Silmarillion, J.R. Tolkien just drops name after name after name, tells you exactly what happens for the most part, and then kind of builds his world that way. And it's amazing because you have a bunch of information, right? Lore that you get to sift through, pick out your favorite parts, and for me, I make videos on them, right? So it's really easy in that sense, but also it kind of takes away some of the mystery, like a decent chunk of the mystery, right? But that's the differences between Lord of the Rings and, A Song of Ice and Fire. That's one of the differences. I love both of these stories very much, If you want some Lord of the Rings content, check the link down below in the description. I've been doing a bunch of that recently. Now, even though I just went into that whole spiel about how no one really knows how old not only Westeros is, but also Oldtown itself, right? There's this dude named Maester Jellicoe, who pretty much suggests the idea that Oldtown began as a settlement on top of the Whispering Sound as a trading post, where basically ships from Valyria would come in and trade with the inhabitants of Oldtown. Like Old Gis and the Summer Isles would go there to replenish their provisions and make repairs on their ships and trade with potentially the elder races, so the Children of the Forest, the Giants that may have been down there, right? This is how sort of Oldtown probably started. Now, when you're trying to figure out who built Oldtown, like you could, we kind of just established how it started, but like who built the actual Hightower itself, you kind of have to look all over the world of Westeros. Like on page 214 in The World of Ice and Fire, it's mentioned that this dude named Maester Theron, who was a bastard born in the Iron Islands, Theron basically said that there's similarities, like a certain likeness between the black stone of the ancient fortress of the Hightower and that of the sea stone chair, which is the throne of House Greyjoy of Pike in the Iron Islands. Like, the construction methods are very similar. Also, right, you have the Valyrians themselves. Like, Valyrians are the only people that were able to create, the type of architecture that the Hightower's made out of. The Hightower's made out of this fused stone that there's seemingly no seams to it. Like, usually, when you're building stuff, you have to place things together very intricately in order for it to fit perfectly. Well, in the Oldtown itself, the walls are seamless. There's no seams. So it was all built seemingly in one piece. Like, George has this method of construction via dragons, via the Valyrian Road is a perfect example of that. Like, the Valyrian Road, when Tyrion is in Essos, he mentions how fucking perfectly straight it is. That even when it rains, the rain falls off to the side of the road and collects in these little gutters. He mentions how the King's Road in Westeros is pales in comparison to that. The King's Road is something that Jaehaerys, the king at the beginning of House of the Dragon, built in Westeros to connect all 7 kingdoms, right? Tyrion mentions how the Valyrian Road is just far superior to that, and it's thousands of years old, potentially way older than the King's Road itself, but it's just held apart, or held together all these years. And then you also have the Black Walls of Atlantis that seemingly no one is able to get into. Like, if the city's being laid siege to, the part of the city that's inside the black fused stone walls will never be touched because nothing can break that. So this is the same type of material, the same construction style that Oldtown is made out of. So whatever this ancient dragon race of people that went around constructing forts, the 5 forts of Yee, the Hightower in Oldtown, maybe even the wall itself, and then also some of the other locations like the Sea Stone Chair, and then you also have the Valyrian Road, right? That's maybe not the Valyrian Road, but all those other places were probably created, the Hightower itself, right? Oldtown, right? It was probably created by that race of individuals that lived so long ago, history has forgotten their names, and they taught the Valyrians, the Targaryens specifically, right, how to control and tame dragons. Because remember, they started out as lowly shepherds and then eventually went on to conquer the world and have the greatest civilization of all time to known history. Now, as a bit of a side note, and as a direct quote from The World of Ice and Fire, page 216, it's mentioned that the origins of the Citadel are almost as mysterious as those of the Hightower itself. Most credit its founding to the second son of Uthor of Hightower, Prince Paramore the Twisted, a sickly boy born with a withered arm and twisted back. Paramore was bedridden for much of his short life, but had an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond his window. Who does that sound like? Who does that sound like? An insatiable curiosity, a twisted back, a sickly boy born with a withered arm. That sounds like Tyrion. Not quite as bad, but Tyrion, right? So continuing on, the quote goes on to say that it is said that the prince had no greater pleasure in life than listening to scholars argue with one another. Basically, he would hang out with a certain number of wise men, teachers, priests, healers, singers, wizards, alchemists, and sorcerers, and he just loved listening to them all sort of debate. When he ended up dying, his brother, King Rogaine, bequeathed a large tract of land beside the Honeywine to Paramore's pets, that they might establish themselves and continue teaching, learning, and questing after truth, and so they did, and guess what? That ended up turning into, guess what? The Citadel, where the maesters freaking learn everything. Like, isn't that an awesome origin story? There's this dude, right? Paramore. Now, the name Paramore doesn't really ring a bell, but Oregon sounds a lot like Iron Island. This sounds like a lot like the Iron Island culture. Remember, I just established how the Iron Island, the Sea Stone Chair, and Pike that the Greyjoys rule from may potentially be the same as the Hightower, so maybe there's a connection there. And it's funny because in the books right now, Euron is potentially about to sack Oldtown. And guess what? The Hightowers at Oldtown that are sort of in charge with protecting it, they ain't been seen in years. The Lord Hightower is probably dead, and his 2 kids, he's got a daughter and a son. One of them is a sorcerer witch. So this is going to be an interesting thing. Euron may potentially be committing even more kinslaying when he does sack King's Landing if he kills a couple Hightowers. Now, just to sort of in conclusion and wrap this video up, one of the more recent things that's happened is that when Sam is when he finally makes it to the Citadel in Oldtown at the end of A Feast for Crows, he's talking with, obviously, Maester Marwyn, right, and Sphinx, and it's mentioned that the Hightowers, right, can get an army that is 3 times larger than any other bannermen of House Tyrell. The Hightowers are rich enough, as rich as Tywin fucking Lannister, as rich as the Lannisters. They're rich enough to get an army 3 times bigger than any bannerman of House Tyrell. So that's going to be an interesting thing to happen if Euron does decide to attack King's Landing, Oldtown, or potentially King's Landing, and he's got that massive army to worry about, right? So then bringing it even further back to the origins of this, the start of the video, which is House of the Dragon, House Hightower, some of the things that could potentially be explored are the origins of the Hightower when we get, guess what? Daeron. Daeron the Daring is currently being a squire to Ormond Hightower in Oldtown right now. He's gonna start making his way towards King's Landing, obviously, because there's a war and his father died, but ultimately so much lore can be explored when they do that. If you all enjoyed this video, please do me a massive favor and slap a like on it. And then that's the most important thing you could ever do if you enjoy my stuff here on YouTube. Subscribe. please subscribe and turn your notifications all the way on. Like, there's 3 different levels. There's all, personalized, and none. But if you put it on all, you get alerted every time I drop a video or go live or make a post in the community section, anything like that. You'll get an alert for it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And also, consider checking out my Patreon. Over there, you get basically longer forms of content like this video right here. These lore videos, whenever I do them, don't tend to do so well in the algorithm, which is why I'm sort of forced to do leaked videos ever so often, because those videos do well, but my lore breakdown and stuff doesn't. So if you all want more like this, please, if you can, do your part and slap a like on this, and then also make sure you share it. But if you can't do any of that, thank you for watching. That's the most important thing. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Along that, and super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com, specifically members of my Dragonite tier, Breanne Johnson and the North Must Remember. Y'all are awesome, and thank you for everyone's support. Along that.